What if they disrespected you every single day, shoved you, mocked you, thinking you're weak, but inside you've got a secret that could shatter their world? What if those bullies just made the biggest mistake of their lives? Meet Kyle Ridley, a black kid who rolled into Brookside and turned the tables on everyone. Get ready for a wild ride with a newbie who broke all the rules. Stick around, drop your take in the comments. What would you do? Brookside is the kind of place where time seems to have hit pause. Narrow streets wind between old houses, little roadside shops with faded signs line the way, and everyone knows everyone else from diapers to death. Nothing changes here, and the people are all alike. Same thoughts, same skin color, almost all white. It's a town where outsiders stick out like a sore thumb. And then one day, a new kid walked into Brookside High. Kyle Ridley, a black guy with short dreads, dark eyes, and a calm that you couldn't miss. His family moved here because his mom got a job at the local hospital. But the second Kyle stepped into that school hallway, he knew he wasn't welcome. Day one was a test. He walked into class and the air thickened. Silence hung like a storm about to break. Someone whispered in the corner, someone else smirked. A few girls giggled, hands over their mouths. Kyle didn't bother looking around. He just made his way to the back corner desk, far from everyone. Pulled out his notebook, rested his hands on the table. His movements were steady, deliberate. He wasn't here for trouble or attention. He didn't need friends in this place. He was used to being alone. But that silence, that calm, it wasn't weakness. It was a steel wall no one had noticed yet. Brookside High isn't just a school. It's got its own laws, its own order. Not the kind posted on bulletin boards, but the kind enforced by the students. Well, by one student, Blake Harrison, tall, broad-shouldered, with a cocky grin, son of the head football coach. He's the king around here, always surrounded by his crew. Ryan Crow, a wiry guy with a tongue that cuts like a blade. Matt Douglas, a hulking brute with fists the size of bricks and barely enough brain to follow orders. Connor Mitchell, the rumor mill who could spin a story so well the whole school believed it by lunch. And Chase Walker, the quietest but the creepiest. His icy eyes said more than words ever could, and his silence promised trouble. These guys decided who fit in and who stayed on the sidelines. And Kyle, with his dark skin and steady gaze, was an instant red target in their sights. It all kicked off in the cafeteria on day 3. Typical lunch scene: buzz of voices, clatter of trays, the smell of overcooked fries. Kyle sat alone at a corner table, eating slow, eyes down. His black hoodie bunched up a bit as he leaned over his plate. Around him, groups of friends chattered, but no one came near. He was an island in that sea of faces. But Blake Harrison clocked him. He didn't like it when someone didn't fit his world. Blake stood up from the center table, where his crew ruled like royalty. He shoved his tray of half-eaten food aside, nodded to his guys, "Let's go," and headed for Kyle. His steps echoed on the linoleum. Ryan, Matt, Connor, and Chase trailed behind like shadows. The crowd hushed, sensing a show. "Hey, newbie!" Blake slammed his hand on Kyle's table. The tray jolted, the fork clinked against the plate, but Kyle didn't flinch. He raised his eyes, slow, steady, and met Blake's gaze. "What, they don't take you for football? Or you just good at running?" Laughter rippled from the nearby tables. Ryan jumped in, arms crossed. "Maybe he's mute. Doesn't speak our language?" Connor snickered, nudging Matt. "Or he swallowed his tongue, huh, Matt?" Matt guffawed, slapping his knee. "Yep, Connor, nailed it." Chase stayed silent, but his stare drilled into Kyle, like he was trying to crack him open. Kyle set his fork down, grabbed his tray, and stood. No words, no hint of anger. He just walked away, leaving a silence that hung like smoke. The crew watched him go. Ryan sneered. Who does he think he is? Matt banged a fist on the table. Doesn't know our rules, that's all. Connor grinned. We'll teach him. He'll figure out his place soon enough. Blake said nothing. His face darkened. He was used to people reacting. Fear, submission, anger. But Kyle, he didn't care. And that burned Blake up inside, like a hot coal. A couple of days later, the accidents started. Kyle's walking down the hall, and someone, usually Ryan, accidentally shoves him with a shoulder. Whoops, didn't see you there. Ryan tosses out with a smirk, strolling off. Next day, Kyle opens his locker. His books are soaked, water dripping, ink smeared into a mess. Connor's a few steps away, whistling a tune, eyes glinting with glee. Kyle stares at the ruined pages, shakes off the water, and heads to class. No words, no grimace. But Blake wasn't letting up. He watched Kyle from afar, in the halls, during breaks, in the cafeteria. This newbie wouldn't break. He didn't yell, didn't snitch, didn't run to the teachers. And that drove Blake nuts. So he upped the game. Rumors. He nodded to Connor. Tell everyone what you know. Connor smirked. On it. By tonight, the whole school's gonna talk. And they did. Connor whispered in corners. Heard he got kicked out of his last school for fighting. Nearly killed someone. Dangerous dude, I'm telling you. The halls buzzed. People started eyeing Kyle, whispering behind his back. Some even steered clear, like he was a ticking bomb. But Kyle kept walking, like he didn't hear a thing. His calm just fanned the flames for Blake. A week passed. Kyle found a refuge in the school library. After classes, he'd stay there, flipping through books, soaking in the quiet. It was his spot, away from the noise and stares. But one evening he stayed late, stepped outside as the sky darkened, street lights casting long shadows, and he felt it. Something was off. Footsteps behind him, soft but distinct. He slowed, stopped near the sports field. The air thickened with tension. Kyle turned. 5 of them. Blake up front, Ryan, Matt, Connor, and Chase behind him. They closed in like a pack of wolves. Think you can ignore us? Blake's voice cut through the stillness, low and mocking. He stepped closer, fists clenched. No one's going to see this, Ryan added with a grin, glancing around. Just a little chat. Matt cracked his knuckles, his bulk looming over Kyle. Respect us, Blake growled, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. Kyle locked eyes with him, for the first time, and there wasn't a shred of fear, just a deep, dangerous calm. Blake frowned, took another step. Then it all shifted. Matt lunged first. His fist flew at Kyle's face with enough force to drop anyone. Mistake. Kyle moved in a flash, caught Matt's arm at the wrist, twisted it with machine-like precision. A crack, a scream, and Matt hit his knees, clutching his hand. Blake froze, eyes wide. Ryan stepped back. Connor blinked, Chase tensed but held still. Kyle straightened up. His voice was quiet, firm as steel. I tried to avoid this, but you're not worth my fear. Silence blanketed the field. Ryan swallowed hard. Connor looked away. Chase stared coldly but didn't budge. Blake's knuckles whitened. He wanted to snap back, but instead he waved a hand. Let's go. They left, dragging a groaning Matt. Kyle stood there like nothing had happened, his breathing steady, gaze calm. Next morning, the school exploded with rumors. Kyle took Matt down with one move, kids whispered in the halls. Some said, he's got to be in a gang. Others added, he's had special training. The story snowballed. But Kyle stayed silent. His secret? Simple. His dad, a former pro fighter, taught him not just how to fight, but how to keep control. Mr. Reynolds, the history teacher, had seen it from the start. He'd been at Brookside for 20 years, watched countless kids come and go. But Kyle stood out. One day he approached him in the library, pulled up a chair and sat across. "I saw how you move," he said, meeting Kyle's eyes. "Where'd you learn that?" Kyle set his book down. A pause. "My dad was a fighter," he said shortly. Reynolds nodded, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "You could stop them, but what are you going to choose to do?" Kyle didn't answer. He knew. Strength wasn't the issue. The question was how to use it, and whether he should. Blake was furious. He'd been humiliated. He was Brookside's king, the coach's son, the guy everyone bowed to, and some newbie made him back off in front of his own crew. It wasn't just a loss. It was a gut punch to his pride. He had to take back control, whatever it took. Next day, he huddled his crew in the cafeteria corner. "This Kyle's a nobody," he hissed through gritted teeth. "Spread the word he's a coward. If he's so tough, let him prove it." Connor grinned. "We'll make it stick. Whole school will be talking by dinner." And they got to work. Connor whispered in corners. "Kyle's scared of Blake. Hit Matt in the dark, but he'd choke in a real fight." Ryan piled on. "He's only tough against losers like Matt." The halls hummed. "Why's Kyle so quiet?" "Scared." In the cafeteria, Connor casually passed Kyle's table and said loud enough for all to hear, "Some people are only tough in the shadows, huh?" Ryan jumped in. "Or against Matt. Matt's not exactly a genius, you know." Laughter bounced around the room. Kyle ate silently, but he caught Blake's eye across the way. Blake sat, arms crossed, smirking. The trap was set. After class, Blake went for the kill. He stepped onto the school courtyard, where kids milled around before heading home. His crew spread the word fast, and soon a crowd formed. Blake stood in the middle, raised his hands for quiet. "Listen up," his voice boomed over the yard. "You've heard about Kyle Ridley. Took Matt down with one hit, right? But why's he dodging me?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Blake squinted, scanning faces. "If he's so great, let him prove it. Face me man to man. Or he's just a liar who's only good at sneak attacks." All eyes turned to Kyle. He stood off to the side, hands in pockets, calm as ever. The crowd held its breath. Kyle stepped forward. Slow, no rush. Stopped in front of Blake. Their eyes locked. "I don't fight the weak," he said. Quiet but clear enough for everyone. Dead silence. 2 seconds stretched like forever. Then Blake snapped. His fist shot toward Kyle's face, fueled by rage. But Kyle tilted his head, smooth, precise, and the punch sailed past. A light shove to Blake's shoulder, and he stumbled, lost balance, crashed to the ground in front of the whole school. The crowd erupted in laughter. Kyle turned and walked off. Blake lay there, face burning with shame. His power started to crumble. Blake couldn't let it slide. His world was falling apart. He'd always been the predator at the top, the one everyone feared. And now he'd been humiliated in front of all, without even taking a hit. He rounded up a new crew, not just his usual posse, but real fighters. Jason King, wrestling team captain, a mountain of muscle with a vice grip. Derek Lane, a hothead who'd been suspended for brawls. And Zach Torres, quiet but deadly. He didn't fight without reason, but when he did, he didn't stop. Blake spun a story. "Kyle's disrespected us all. If we don't stop him, he'll come for everyone." They bought it. He sent Kyle a text. "After school, 5 p.m., real fight." No choice. The reply came quick. "Fine." No fuss, no hesitation. At 5, the sky glowed orange. The lot behind the school was perfect. No teachers, no witnesses, just concrete and patchy grass. Blake marched in front, Jason and Derek like walls of muscle beside him, Ryan and Zach bringing up the rear. They were sure this wasn't a fight, it was an execution. But Kyle was already there, alone. Hands in pockets, gaze steady. He didn't look cornered. He looked like it was just another day. Blake smirked, stepped up. No saving you this time. Kyle shrugged. Don't need it. Jason charged first. His fist came down like a truck, but Kyle slid aside, kicked Jason's knee. He crumpled with a yell. Connor rushed next, but Kyle grabbed his wrist, shoved with his shoulder. Connor hit the ground gasping. Ryan and Derek froze, then bolted. Blake stood alone. You think this is over? He snarled. Kyle looked at him. No anger, no challenge. It's your end, he said softly. The crowd at the edge of the lot burst into applause. Blake clenched his fist but didn't move. He got it. He'd lost. Not to strength, but to himself. Kyle turned and walked away. A week later, the school had changed. Blake vanished from the halls, his crew melted away. Fear was gone. Kyle stayed the same. Quiet, low-key. But one evening, Blake found him at that same lot. I was wrong, he said, staring at the ground. Kyle nodded. No words, no gloating. Just a nod. Brookside wasn't the same. Power isn't in fists. It's in self-control. Kyle showed them all. And that's the story, folks. Now it's your turn. What would you do in Kyle's shoes? Stand up to a Blake or stay in the shadows? Maybe you've got your own bully story? Drop it in the comments. I'm dying to hear. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got more epic tales like this coming your way. Hit that like button if Kyle inspired you and share this with your crew. See you in the next video.